6 Signs of a Weak Man. Inner steel, YouTube script. Cold open. He had everything a man could want. A good salary. A beautiful wife. Friends who called him reliable. A house with a garden and 2 cars in the driveway. And yet, every morning he woke up and felt like he was disappearing. He couldn't explain it. Couldn't name it. He just knew that somewhere between who he told himself he was and who he actually showed up as in the world, there was a gap. A wide, dark, growing gap. He was weak. Not in the way people usually think about weakness. Not physically. Not financially. But in the way that matters most, in his character, his resolve, his relationship with himself. And the worst part? He didn't even know it. Most men don't. Because weakness today doesn't look like what it used to. It doesn't show up as cowardice on a battlefield. It shows up in how you respond when someone disrespects you. It shows up in the promises you make to yourself and quietly break. It shows up in the excuses you've rehearsed so many times they've started to feel like truth. This video is not here to shame you. It's here to wake you up. Because the first step to becoming the man you're capable of being is having the courage to look honestly at the man you are right now. These are the 6 signs of a weak man. Not a weak body. A weak character. And if any of these hit close to home, that's exactly where they're supposed to land. Let's begin. Sign 1. He cannot sit with discomfort. In 1914, Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, became trapped in the Antarctic ice. The vessel was slowly crushed. The crew watched their only way home get swallowed by the sea. For nearly 2 years, Shackleton and his men were stranded in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. No rescue was coming. Temperatures dropped to -40. Food ran low. The darkness lasted for months. And yet, not a single man died under his command. What kept them alive wasn't luck. It wasn't even survival skills alone. What kept them alive was the capacity to sit with suffering without surrendering to it. Shackleton never ran from the discomfort. He walked directly into it, every single day, with his eyes open and his mind steady. Now contrast that with the average man today. He sits down to work and the moment his mind resists, he picks up his phone. He starts a difficult conversation and the second it becomes tense, he deflects with a joke or backs down entirely. He sets an alarm for 5 in the morning and the moment the darkness hits, he convinces himself that rest is more important than discipline. He cannot sit with discomfort. And so discomfort runs his life. Here is what most men don't understand. Discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the signal that something important is happening. Every time you push through a moment of resistance, a hard workout, a difficult conversation, a task your mind wants to avoid, you are building something inside yourself that no amount of comfort can give you. You are building proof. Proof that you can be trusted by yourself. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, journals never intended for anyone else to read, that the obstacle is the way. Not around the way. Not beside the way. Through it. The obstacle itself is the path. A weak man treats discomfort as a signal to stop. A strong man treats it as a signal to lean in. Ask yourself honestly, what are you avoiding right now? What conversation have you been putting off? What goal have you been circling around but never quite starting? What part of your life do you scroll past because the reality of looking at it clearly is too uncomfortable? The answer to that question is the exact direction you need to walk. Shackleton didn't choose comfort. He chose his men. He chose the mission. He chose to be someone who did not flinch. And history remembers him because of it. No one ever built a life worth living by choosing easy over and over again. Weakness lives in the escape. Strength lives in the stay. Every time you choose to stay, to endure, to push through, to not reach for the phone or the drink or the distraction, you are adding a brick to a wall that will one day be unbreakable. That wall is called character. And it is the only structure that actually protects you when the storms of life hit for real. Sign 2. He blames everything but himself. There is a story, lesser known but more instructive than most, about a man named James Stockdale. In 1965, Stockdale was shot down over Vietnam and captured. For 7.5 years, he was held as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, one of the most brutal prison camps in modern history. He was tortured over 20 times. He was kept in isolation. He was denied basic human dignities that most of us have never had to think twice about. And yet he emerged not just alive, but transformed. Stronger. Clearer. More himself than when he went in. When Jim Collins later asked him how he survived, Stockdale said something that has been studied and quoted by leadership scholars ever since. He said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life." Then Collins asked, "Who didn't make it out?" Stockdale said, "The optimists. The men who said, 'We'll be home by Christmas.' Then Christmas came and went. Then Easter. Then the next Christmas. And eventually their hearts broke, because they had put their faith in circumstances changing rather than in themselves." Stockdale did not blame the guards. He did not blame the war. He did not blame his government, or his fate, or the universe. He took complete ownership of the only thing he could: his own mind, his own choices, his own response to what was happening around him. A weak man does the opposite. He blames his upbringing for his failures. He blames his boss for his lack of progress. He blames his partner for his unhappiness. He blames the economy, the system, his bad luck, the people who didn't believe in him, the people who did believe in him and still somehow let him down. He has an explanation for everything, except himself. And here is the insidious thing about blame: it feels like clarity. It feels like you finally understand the situation. But it is a trap. Because the moment you make someone else responsible for your life, you have handed them your power. You have decided that your future is in their hands, not yours. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and became one of history's greatest philosophers, said it directly. "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." He was a slave. He had chains around his ankles. He had every external reason to blame the world for his condition. Instead, he built a philosophy of radical personal responsibility that has shaped Western thought for 2,000 years. His physical chains were real. But no one could put chains on his mind. The question is not what happened to you. Every man has been handed something unfair. The question is what you are doing with what you've been handed. A strong man looks at his life, all of it, the painful parts too, and says, "I am responsible." Not because he caused every bad thing that came his way, but because he is the only one who can meaningfully respond to every bad thing. Blame is the language of the powerless. Ownership is the language of the strong. If you find yourself constantly explaining why your life isn't what you want it to be, stop. Stop explaining. Stop rehearsing the justifications. Start building. Because here's the hard truth: as long as the problem lives outside of you, so does the solution. The moment you take ownership, even of things that weren't entirely your fault, the solution moves inside of you. And that is where real power lies. Subscribe prompt. If this is already hitting different, if you're feeling that pull towards something better inside you, subscribe to Inner Steel right now. This channel exists for men who are done making excuses and ready to build. Hit subscribe, stay with me, and let's keep going. Sign 3. He has no code he lives by. In 1997, a young professor named Randy Pausch had just been rejected from his dream research position. He had wanted to work in virtual reality, a field he had been obsessed with since childhood. The department turned him away. Most men at that point would have let the dream quietly die. Instead, Pausch picked up the phone, called the professor who rejected him, and had a direct, respectful conversation about what it would take to find another way in. Not because the universe owed him anything, but because he had a personal code, a set of principles he had chosen to live by regardless of what stood in his way. One of those principles was this: brick walls are not there to stop you. They are there to show you how badly you want something. Years later, Pausch gave what became known as the last lecture, a talk he delivered after being diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. He stood on that stage with 10 tumors in his liver, fully aware that he had months to live, and delivered one of the most energetic, joyful, and purposeful speeches ever recorded. Not because he wasn't afraid. Not because he wasn't in pain. But because he had a code. A set of values he had chosen, consciously, deliberately, and lived by regardless of what life threw at him. He knew who he was. And because he knew who he was, no diagnosis could take that from him. A weak man has no code. He has moods. He is kind when he feels like being kind. He is disciplined when motivation is running high. He is honest when honesty is convenient. His behavior is not guided by values he has consciously chosen, it is governed by whatever he happens to be feeling in the moment. And that is why his life lacks consistency. That is why the people around him never quite know which version of him they're going to get. That is why he himself doesn't know who he is without external validation reflecting an identity back at him. The Stoics called this living according to nature, meaning living in alignment with the rational, principled part of yourself, not the reactive emotional part. They believed that a man without a guiding philosophy was like a ship without a rudder. He might travel fast. He might travel far. But he will never arrive anywhere meaningful. Your code doesn't have to be complex. In fact, the simpler it is, the more likely you are to actually live by it. It might be, I keep my word. I do not quit when things get hard. I speak truth even when it costs me. I take care of my body. I protect my peace. I invest in my growth every single day. But whatever it is, it has to be yours. Not something you absorbed passively from culture. Not something someone told you a man should be. Something you have sat with, examined, chosen deliberately, and committed to. Because the man who knows his values is the man who cannot be pushed around by circumstance. He doesn't need to negotiate who he is every morning. He already knows. And that knowledge is armor that nothing on the outside can penetrate. Randy Pausch died in 2008. But people still watch his lecture. Still quote it. Still send it to friends at the lowest moments of their lives. Not because he was the smartest man in the room. Because he was the most grounded. He knew what he stood for. And he stood for it all the way to the end. What do you stand for? Not in theory. In practice. On a Tuesday morning when no one is watching, when you're tired and tempted to cut corners, what do you actually stand for? If you don't have an answer to that yet, finding one is the most important work you can do. Sign 4. He seeks constant validation. There was a photographer in the mid-20th century named Vivian Maier. She worked as a nanny in Chicago, caring for other people's children while quietly carrying out one of the most extraordinary creative lives of her era. In her off hours, she walked the streets with a camera and took photographs. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. She developed many of them privately, and showed them to almost no one. She never pursued fame. Never sought an exhibition. Never tried to build an audience, or a reputation. She died in 2009 in near obscurity. A few months before her death, a young man named John Maloof bought a box of her undeveloped negatives at a local auction house for less than $400. What he found inside changed the photography world. Maier's images were extraordinary, compositionally perfect, emotionally raw, technically masterful, and among the finest street photography ever captured. But she had created every single one of them for herself. Not for praise. Not for recognition. Not for followers or comments or anyone's approval. She made them because making them was the expression of something true inside her. Vivian Maier is now considered one of the greatest photographers of the 20th century. And she never sought a single piece of external validation for it. A weak man is the opposite. He cannot act without an audience. He makes a decision and immediately looks for someone to confirm it was the right one. He posts his progress online before the progress is even real, because the likes feel better than the actual work. He changes his opinion based on who he's talking to. He shrinks himself around strong people and puffs himself up around weaker ones. His identity is not a foundation. It's a mirror, and it reflects back whatever the room around him is projecting. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that deserves to be read slowly and revisited often. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The man who needs constant validation has traded his sovereignty for approval. He has made other people's opinions the currency of his self-worth. And that is the most precarious economy a man can live in, because opinions change with the wind, and the man who builds his identity on them will be rebuilt and demolished 1,000 times before he dies. Think about the people whose respect you most genuinely want. The men you look up to. The leaders you admire from a distance. Now ask yourself, do those men seem like they're performing for approval? Do they change their stance the moment someone pushes back? Do they make decisions based on what will look best on the outside? No. They don't. Because real strength is self-sourced. It does not need an audience. It does not shrink or expand based on the temperature of the room. The work of becoming a man who doesn't need validation is not about becoming cold or indifferent to others. It's about building such a clear and honest relationship with yourself that you no longer need anyone else to tell you who you are. You know your values. You know your standard. You know what you're building and why. And from that foundation, you can receive feedback, absorb criticism, hear praise, without any of it shaking what's underneath. Vivian Maier didn't need the world to confirm that her photographs were beautiful. She already knew. She had already done the work of knowing. And so eventually, the world caught up and agreed. Build something you believe in. Work on it in silence if you have to. Then let what you build speak for itself. Subscribe prompt. If this channel is giving you something real, something you can actually use, subscribe to Inner Steel right now. Every video on this channel is built for the man who is choosing to stop being passive and start being powerful. Subscribe and stay in the fight. Sign 5. He breaks promises to himself. In the early 1990s, a man named David Goggins was working night shifts spraying cockroaches for a living. He weighed close to 300 pounds. He was eating donuts to cope with a life that had gone nowhere, and showed little sign of going anywhere soon. His childhood had been defined by poverty, violence, and a father who terrorized his family. He had failed his military entrance exam multiple times. By every external measurement, his story should have ended there, in a dead-end job, in a body he had given up on, in a life built on the rubble of broken dreams. Instead, he made himself a promise. And this time, unlike every time before, he kept it. He decided to become a Navy SEAL. Not because someone told him he could. Not because he felt ready or confident or inspired. He decided to do it specifically because he felt the least ready he'd ever been in his life. He wanted to test himself against the hardest thing he could imagine. And he refused to let himself off the hook. He lost over 100 pounds in under 3 months. He passed BUD/S, one of the most grueling military selection programs in existence, after enduring multiple cycles that broke his body. He went on to hold the world record for pull-ups. He ran 100-mile ultramarathons on fractured bones. Not because he was gifted. Because he stopped breaking promises to himself. Goggins talks about something he calls the accountability mirror. Every morning, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror and spoke truth to himself. Not affirmations. Not positive self-talk. Truth. He told himself exactly who he was and exactly what he needed to change. And then he changed it. A weak man has a very different relationship with himself. He sets the alarm and hits snooze. He says he'll start Monday. He commits to a plan on Sunday night, and quietly abandons it by Tuesday. He tells himself, "I'll do it later," so many times that later becomes a place he never actually arrives. He has become fluent in the language of intentions and a complete stranger to the language of follow-through. And here is what almost no one talks about enough. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you damage your relationship with yourself. Slowly. Quietly. But irreparably, until you repair it consciously and deliberately. Your brain is always watching. It records what you say and what you do. And when those two things consistently don't match, it stops trusting you. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, crushing way. You start to feel that vague but heavy sense that you can't be counted on, not by others, but by yourself. That low-level anxiety, that undercurrent of self-doubt, it doesn't come from outside you. It comes from a history of not showing up for yourself. And it will persist until you start doing the opposite. The Stoics had a concept called the inner citadel. The idea that there is a core part of you, your rational, disciplined, principled self, that is completely impenetrable to the outside world. But you have to build it. You have to reinforce it. And you build it one kept promise at a time. Start small if you have to. Make one promise to yourself today and keep it. Then tomorrow another. Over weeks and months, something fundamental shifts inside you. You start to become a man whose word means something, first to yourself, and then, organically, to everyone around you. Because integrity is not primarily about what you show the world. It's about what you show yourself in the moments when no one else is in the room. David Goggins didn't become extraordinary by waiting for the right conditions or the right amount of motivation or the right sign from the universe. He became extraordinary by deciding who he was going to be, and then refusing to let anyone, including himself, talk him out of it. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when it would be easy to quit and no one would ever know? Who are you at 2 a.m. when the only person judging you is you? That man, the man in private, is the real you. And it's time to make him someone worth being. Sign 6. He is afraid of other men's success. In the early 20th century, 2 scientists sat across from each other in the emerging field of astronomy. One of them, Edwin Hubble, was quietly revolutionizing our understanding of the universe, proving that the Milky Way was just one galaxy among billions, reshaping the very map of existence. Another man in the same field had worked on similar problems, arrived at overlapping conclusions, and watched Hubble's name become the one attached to the history-making discoveries. He had a choice. He could spend his career in resentment. He could quietly undermine Hubble's work. He could nurse the wound of being second in a field that would remember only the first. Instead, he engaged with Hubble's work seriously, celebrated it genuinely, and continued contributing his own rigorous research. Because he understood something that weak men never do: the universe of human achievement is not a pie with a limited number of slices. It is an expanding frontier. One man's discovery does not diminish another man's ability to discover. Envy blinds you to this. And envy is the currency of weak men. Look at how this plays out in ordinary life. A colleague gets a promotion and instead of congratulating him, the weak man fumes silently. He convinces himself the promotion wasn't deserved. He starts dropping small poison into conversations, a raised eyebrow here, a loaded comment there. He invests real energy into tearing down someone else's building because he has no conviction in his own. Or a friend starts a business, and it begins to succeed. And the weak man, who once called himself a friend, starts looking for cracks. Finding the reasons it won't last. Waiting, almost eagerly, for the failure he can point to. Not because he wants his friend to fail exactly, but because their success has thrown his own stagnation into uncomfortable relief. This is one of the ugliest and most destructive expressions of weakness in a man. And it is more common than most people want to admit. Envy masquerades as standards. It tells you, I just have high expectations. I'm not easily impressed. But scratch the surface and you find something far more honest underneath. The belief, the deep, terrified belief, that someone else's success means you have failed. That the world is a zero-sum game, and every victory someone else claims is one stolen from you. It is a profoundly impoverished way to see the world. And it will poison every relationship and every ambition you have if you let it run unchecked. Seneca wrote, "A man's character is revealed by what triggers his envy." Read that again. What you envy shows you what you want. And what you want shows you who you're capable of becoming. The desire itself is not the problem. The problem is when desire curdles into resentment instead of being transformed into fuel. A strong man looks at another man's success and asks, what did he do that I can learn from? What choices did he make that I haven't made yet? What discipline did he maintain that I have been avoiding? He celebrates what others build because he understands that the world is not a contest with one winner. Excellence calls to excellence. Strength recognizes strength. And the man who can genuinely rejoice in other men's success is the man who has developed enough internal security that he is no longer threatened by the light around him. Some of the most powerful figures in history built their legacies by surrounding themselves with people who were better than them in specific areas, and being genuinely glad about it. Because the man who is threatened by other people's abilities is the man who has not yet developed confidence in his own. When you feel that sting of envy, don't suppress it and don't obey it. Translate it. Use it as a diagnostic tool. Ask what it's really telling you about what you want and where you're falling short of your own standards. Then take that information and put it to work. Your only real competitor is who you were yesterday. Stop watching other men's scoreboards. Get back to building your own. Closing. So there they are. 6 signs of a weak man. He cannot sit with discomfort. He blames everything but himself. He has no code he lives by. He seeks constant validation. He breaks promises to himself. And he is afraid of other men's success. Now, and this matters, this video is not a verdict. It is not a ceiling. It is not a label to stick on yourself or someone else. It is a mirror. Every single man on this planet has shown some of these signs at some point in his life. Every one of us has run from discomfort, blamed the wrong thing, sought approval we didn't need, broken a promise we genuinely meant to keep, felt the sting of someone else's success. That is not failure. That is being human. The question is not whether you have been weak. The question is whether you are willing to do the work of becoming strong. Shackleton came home. Stockdale came home. Goggins rebuilt himself from 300 pounds and cockroach spray into one of the most mentally formidable human beings alive. Vivian Maier created masterpieces in silence for decades without a single person validating her. Randy Pausch stood on that stage with terminal cancer and showed the world what it looks like to live fully until the very last moment. None of them were perfect. None of them were born exceptional. They became exceptional by choosing, again and again and again, in small private moments no one saw, to confront themselves honestly and respond with everything they had. That is what this channel is for. Not to make you feel good about staying the same. To make you feel capable of becoming something more. The Stoics believe that every single day is a new opportunity to practice virtue. Not to achieve it perfectly. Not to arrive at some finished state and declare yourself done. But to practice it. To try. To fall short and get up and try again tomorrow. To become, by degrees, more aligned with the man you know, deep down where the noise gets quiet, you are capable of being. That work never ends. And that's not a burden. That is the point. The man who has nothing left to become is the man who has stopped truly living. You're still here. You're still watching. Which means something in you is still reaching. Do not waste it. If this video gave you something real, if even one of these signs landed where it needed to, share it with a man in your life who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Inner Steel. Every video on this channel is built for the man who is choosing, right now, today, to be better. We go deep here. We go honest here. And we never stop pushing. The road is long. But you don't have to walk it alone. I'll see you in the next one.